The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Environment. The Dartmouth Lakes are a social and economic backbone of our community. In February, a group of concerned citizens gathered at the Finley Community Centre with myself and my colleague from Dartmouth South to discuss the worrying status of our lakes. Last summer, Lake Banook, which plays host to 4 local paddling clubs and international paddling competitions, was closed for several weeks, more than any other summer, due mainly to algae growth. As our summers get warmer, the residents of Dartmouth are worried that this will become a recurring problem. Can the minister tell me what the department is doing to ensure that invasive algae and weed growth is dealt with in Dartmouth's lakes?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This was a subject, I thank the member for that question again, certainly something that was raised in estimates again yesterday. The main concern with the Department of Environment in our lakes, and we recognize certainly, we know, I believe there's almost 2,400 lakes in our province, and we know with the climate change expanding, we know the temperatures are getting warmer, that algae may be a problem in many of the lakes around our provinces. Unfortunately, the problem is complex. We need to know where the food supplying that algae is coming from, and there can be numerous sources. But the main focus of the Department of Environment, Mr. Speaker, is to make sure that the lakes are safe to use. We need to know that there's not bacteria in the water that's going to affect people, and that's why our staff does testing to make sure that the bacteria levels are suffice for swimmers, and if it's not, then the lakes are closed for swimming purposes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Mr. Speaker, water protection falls under provincial jurisdiction. In Little Albro Lake, where the invasive lily floating yellow heart has made the lake unusable, residents who have called the minister's department have been redirected to the city. From there, they're redirected back to the province. They've taken it upon themselves to try and stem the growth of this invasive species, but they are quickly running out of options. Now there are reports that the floating yellowheart has been spotted in neighbouring Big Albro Lake. Mr. Speaker, if the minister insists on continuing to evade the responsibility of the province to protect our waterways, will she at least commit to providing funding to the HRM necessary to battle this invasive plant and make our lakes usable again?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for that question. Again, you know, the mandate of the Department of Environment is for the safety of the the lack of bacteria in the lakes, and certainly we are responding to that in the best way possible. As for the invasive species, that falls under the direction of the Department of Lands and Forestry. I know there was also conversation yesterday about weeds in the lakes, and if we'll look after the weeds in the lakes. This is a joint responsibility, Mr. Speaker. This doesn't fall under the Department of Environment. Certainly the HRM is also responsible for lakes in their areas. Lands and Forestry also has some responsibility, as well as the Department of Environment. We all take our role very seriously. We realize the importance of lakes to our province. After all, if you're flying above the province, all you see is lakes, and you realize the abundance of them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.